it feels like we're coming to a head for everything. You have massive demand from all of these treasury companies buying, MicroStrategy, you have ETFs now with like 1.3 million and more coming in. Like there's a massive imbalance of money coming in versus coming out. Like flows are net positive for ETFs. Then if nation states come into the fray and that hits a point at which, debt is no longer able to be sold, like the US treasuries, they're having a hard time selling them now, which is also why they're turning to stablecoins. And you have unfunded liabilities coming to due. What happens? Something happens there, something spectacular. There is some valid concern that these treasury companies could trigger the next bear market. Something blows up.
Samson Mow opens with a simple but terrifying premise. If no one is buying treasuries and the debt is ballooning, something has to give. He's referring to the current economic backdrop. Governments are running record deficits, debt is exploding, and buyers for U.S. treasuries are drying up. Even more concerning, recent regulatory changes are allowing banks to hold even fewer reserves. These aren't signs of strength, they're signals of panic behind the curtain.
Please take a little time to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications for more videos like this. You can also check out our other videos on cryptocurrencies and the overall digital asset space and drop your comments and observations in the comments section below. Everything you do helps with the YouTube algorithm and immensely contributes to the channel's growth. Thanks and enjoy the video.
If no one's buying treasuries and the debt is ballooning, something's got to give eventually.
Yeah.
I think the banking regulations were just changed. I saw something come out today, and the banks are even held to having less reserves for everything. So it's like they're tinkering with the mechanics of the system right now to alleviate stress on the system, which is constantly building. And maybe stablecoins will stave it off for a year if they push for adoption of stablecoins and they're using stablecoins as a proxy to sell debt. But even that's just kicking the can. But all those trillions in unfunded liabilities have to come due. Well, I think they're going to fight and try to maintain power over the printing press for various reasons, like for their view of why it's good for society. But I think if people recognize Bitcoin as an alternative, and it is like a practical replacement, I don't see them switching. It's just like the CBDC in Nigeria never took off. You could almost use the CBDC as a proxy for a currency reset. Are people going to use it? And I think even in China, people aren't willing to use the CBDC. They're still sticking with, WeChat Pay and Alipay, which is like a digital wrapper around the RMB. But we'll see. I mean, it'd be interesting to watch and see if any country right now, like in the next year or so, that does try to issue a new currency can succeed in doing so, because I think Bitcoin has reached enough market saturation and the infrastructure around it, like wallets and everything, are at the point at which it could just take over. They need to understand that they should hold their own assets. And it's a big gap going from your money's in your bank and it's safe, quote unquote, to I need to keep my own money and take responsibility for that completely on my own, 100%, and if it is lost or stolen, it's gone for good. And that chasm is a big chasm. And I don't know if there's a shortcut to get there, and I don't even know if we can fully bridge that just by making better Bitcoin wallets. And this might be a natural phenomenon that takes time. Like one thing I think helped for Canada was when the government declared martial law and started freezing bank accounts. And I think that educated a lot of Canadians into realizing, well, I probably need some insurance in the form of Bitcoin, which cannot be frozen. Because that was unprecedented, but it showed how fragile the traditional system is. Like the government can just say, okay, you're a terrorist now because you donated to this convoy protesting lockdowns and mandated vaccine injections. And that is pretty shocking to most people that in a Western country, liberal democracy, that you can have this type of totalitarian, authoritarian acts happening. And it can happen anywhere. But outside of that, if that didn't happen, I would say a lot of people wouldn't understand that or cross that chasm. But because it happened, they did. So it's almost like you have to have that pain before you will move out of your comfort zone. There's a lot of underfunded liabilities, and that's got to come to a head very soon. Outside of everything else that's happening with Bitcoin, right? So it feels like we're coming to a head for everything. You have massive demand from all these treasury companies buying, MicroStrategy. You have ETFs now with like 1.3 million and more coming in. Like there's a massive imbalance of money coming in versus coming out. Like flows are net positive for ETFs. Then if nation states come into the fray, and that hits a point at which, debt is no longer able to be sold, like the US treasuries, they're having a hard time selling them now, which is also why they're turning to stablecoins. And you have unfunded liabilities coming to due. What happens? Something happens there, something spectacular. There is some valid concern that these treasury companies could trigger the next bear market. Something blows up. I think like a strategy type company where they have very minimal risk and all of their converts and everything are very far out will be fine. But some of the smaller companies that are trading at a huge multiple right now to MNAV, which are not as well positioned as strategy is, could blow up. They're still concerned about these things, but it's got to get to the point where it's career risk not to get into Bitcoin. And I think a lot of them also are waiting for someone else to make a move, specifically the US. That's why I'm very bullish or grateful for movements in the US, because that makes our job a lot easier, because we'll just say, like, look at the US, right? Like Korea will look at the US, Japan will look at the US, Taiwan will look at the US. And you saw that with the ETFs. And I think when the US does something seriously with accumulating for their Bitcoin reserve, everyone else will follow. So we're just kind of priming all the different actors in Asia to wait for that. And when it happens, we'll go back and say it's time to execute on what we talked about.
In a fascinating critique, Mow breaks down what went wrong with Ryan Cohen's much-hyped investment strategy. Cohen raised money, created investor hype, drawing comparisons to Berkshire Hathaway, and was expected to put significant funds into Bitcoin. But he didn't. According to Mow, that was a critical misstep. Not only did Cohen fail to commit, but he also missed prime opportunities to buy on the dips. Worse, he met with Michael Saylor and still didn't act.
Strategic reserve, the executive order for that, and new developments is probably the most interesting aspect of nation-state adoption right now. But you do see follow-on with that. Like Pakistan announced that they're setting up their own strategic reserve. They appointed Saylor. I haven't fact-checked that.
I haven't seen anything verified on that.
I've seen it, but I haven't verified it.
Yeah.
So take that with a grain of salt that he's their advisor now. But it's whether the US makes a big move, like a really tangible move, like passing the Bitcoin Act and actively accumulating Bitcoin, I think that is going to be the next big driver for nation-state adoption. But we'll see like little bits and pieces happening here and there. And we do have our engagements and we're trying to move things along, but it's difficult. Like if you think of it as a normal person, where does Bitcoin stack up in your attention span in a given day? It's probably like, towards the bottom somewhere. It's the same for countries. Like they're always focused on some higher level drama, like Iran and Israel right now, probably top of mind. But it's difficult to kind of get them to prioritize something. But one silver lining, I think, of the Bitcoin treasury companies is that they're elevating that in the awareness. Like in Japan, we engaged with a number of politicians there. Metaplanet definitely has picked up on all of their radars. We cannot not pick up on Metaplanet. Altcoins becoming Bitcoin treasury companies, that reminds me of FTX, right? Like, why did FTX blow up?
FTX more than Luna?
Probably, because FTX, what it was they were using FTT, their token, as a backstop and equivocating it with, as a real asset, even though they printed it. So I think the danger there is if you have something similar set up with an altcoin, like, what is it, Cardano, they're also talking about doing something too. It just blows our mind that...
We're all Bitcoiners now.
Yeah, everyone's a Bitcoiner. But I mean, most altcoins are created to get Bitcoin. So it's not that far from the origin, right? But presenting it as a publicly traded Bitcoin treasury company, that is scary to me of what could be to come. If I was Ryan Cohen, I would have put all of it into buying Bitcoin because that wasn't what the market expected him to do. You're going to raise, they publicized their thing, they made like an investor website looking like Berkshire Hathaway, they did all those things, and the market expected you're going to put all that into Bitcoin, and he didn't. So I think that was the first mistake, that you didn't commit to the strategy. And I guess the second mistake was not executing even when there were opportunities to execute, like dips. He might have missed that first initial chance to buy, which I can understand because when Bitcoin is down, it's scary, right? But he could have averaged in, 500 million every month or something like that for a few months. But he didn't do that either. So I'm not sure. I think it's just fear. And given that he met with Saylor, that's really inexcusable because you had like a one-on-one meeting with the father of the Bitcoin treasury company industry, and you didn't learn anything from that meeting. So, I'm not sure if he's going to make it, but there's still an opportunity because I think anything below 200K per Bitcoin is still a steal. It's a pendulum. If it swings too far one way, it'll swing harder the other way. So we'll see, but I think there are things that we can do because the next election is not for a while. Like bipartisan groups should engage with Democrats and educate them more about Bitcoin. But I can't read it either way. We'll see. But I think Jeff is wrong that it's a nothing burger. It just depends on if, Bo Hines or David Sachs can actually execute on the budget neutral acquisition. And I'm still hopeful that they can get that across because it's within the scope of the executive order. At the same time, I hope that the Bitcoin Act passes and they can actually formally do something. But I think the tone setting of the executive order is a very important piece of this because we can take that and go to other countries and say, hey, look at that. And while it's not active accumulation, it is at least something that we can present. And everyone looks to the US for guidance. If you look at the ETFs, it's the same thing. US started and then, Canada kind of had them, but it wasn't until the US made the move that Hong Kong ETFs and Australian ETFs came. And now we're seeing other regions look to open up to ETFs, if not launch their own. Like Korea, that's one thing they're looking at too.
Looking ahead, Mow believes the next few years will be critical. The executive order in the U.S. around Bitcoin accumulation may be the most powerful domino. While it's not full-blown purchasing yet, the tone it sets matters because other nations take their cue from the U.S. Education remains key. Mow believes bipartisan efforts are needed to engage even with Democrats who may still be skeptical about Bitcoin. He cautions that we're not in a Bitcoin supercycle just yet, but we're getting close.